Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Weyland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show.
Hello and welcome to How to Be a Better DM. This is Tanner Weyland, and together we're going to learn about how to prepare the best adventures and environments for our players to enjoy. It's going to be a great time. Today it's I'm recording this the day after the 4th of July, which if you're in the U.S., that's a holiday that we kind of celebrate the birth of our nation in many ways, but it kind of got me thinking about politics in D&D, and that's our topic today. Not necessarily how politics among the players can change the environment, because that would be a messy topic, and I don't intend to touch that with a 40-foot pole, but rather what about when your characters are involved in a political themed campaign? Now, what could this look like? It could be as simple as like, hey, you need to bring Princess A over to country B so that she can get married to Prince C, right? And that could be political where, there's a bunch of behind-the-scenes powers trying to sabotage your route there, right? But I think that it could even go further than that. A lot of times, especially if you're doing more of a frontier-style campaign where your players are based out of a town, there's many pre-written, one-shots or campaigns where there's a town with a mayor in it, and maybe your players are like, hey, that mayor sucks. I want to run for mayor. That is a wonderful opportunity to start a political campaign. And I'm going to give you some thoughts to think about when you kind of approach this, because it's a very different style of campaign, right? Whether you're running a full-blown election style, tete-a-tete with a political opposing faction, or oftentimes you'll see this. You'll see where the players are trying to get something, and they kind of have to do the walk and talk with a bunch of nobles in a banquet or a ball, right? All of these things can be political. They can kind of introduce a different element of play other than, hey, you're just trying to just straight up persuade or intimidate, or use your skills to magic or fight your way out of a bind, because politics is a very different beast. And I think a lot of DMs, and I've certainly fallen prey to this, I will just go in being like, I won't really touch on the political machinations that the players could indulge in, or I won't really encourage them to kind of get political, or suave, or very or to kind of play the game, quote unquote, with these noble or powerful NPCs. And I think that that's missing because, we always talk about, when you're doing a one-shot or a campaign, to have a good balance of combat, of role-playing, of exploration. And that's all super important. But I also think just saying role-playing is one type of thing is keeping it too simple. And a political scenario opens up a whole nother chapter for your players to explore. So let's say that you have this idea. For mine, for this kind of episode, the idea that we're going to go off of is that simple idea I had before. You are in a town. The mayor and his cronies are kind of corrupt. And your party's like, you know what? Instead of just busting in there and just killing them all, we're going to, there's an election happening. Let's run against that, right? Now, in a situation like that, you're going to want, and this is my first tip, you're going to want a session 0. Now, I'm saying you want a session 0 even if this is happening within a longer running campaign. Why? Because, frankly, you have to prep your characters, right? Think about it in the way that an actual political campaign or a political arc would happen. You don't just jump in. You have to prepare and you have to be aware of the rules and kind of the framework. And that's true also for your party, right? If you're going to get into that, you want to first be sure that your players are down for that kind of adventure. Because I know some players, that I play with right now who are they would love this. They would eat it up, and I intend to use it in the near future. Some of them would be like, oh my goodness, I can plan a campaign rally. I can plan how to sabotage the other, the other noble who's running against me at the ball by, out dancing them or, having some witty back and forth between them. That sounds like a great time. I have players like that. There's going to be other players who are like, can I just fight? And, it's not going to be for everyone. Now, you can help some of those players who are kind of on the fence and be like, you know what, I'm going to make it so fun. I'm going to make it easy. Not too easy, but, I'm going to set you up for success and for a good time. And you can show that in how well you prep them and are accepting to their ideas during this session 0 for this new political arc, right? And so during that session 0, you're going to want to set expectations, right? Like, hey, this, what's the size of this, right? How long do you want this to go on? This arc, how many sessions? Okay, that kind of will constrain what you can do. Because if you're like, hey, we're going to run a full-blown campaign or against the political person in power, or, in support of someone else, if you plan on doing that, you have to realize that takes time, and you want the players to be on board for however long that could take. Second, you're going to want to let them know, hey, what are the stakes here, and who are they facing, and what kind of support would they need to get, right? Because one of the best things about a political campaign is that you can really play up supporters and benefactors, kind of like crowdfunding or for a campaign. You need to kind of give the players essentially the people to know, right? You want to be like, hey, this is so and so, and he owns the local salt mine. I'm realizing salt probably doesn't come out of mines mostly. It comes out of lakes and and riverbeds and such. But regardless, you want to give them the political players. And my warning would be, make sure that you have, for this, you have a lot of neutral powers so that your NPCs feel like they can reach out, and it's they're not necessarily a known factor. Your PCs know why that NPC is worth contacting. It's like, oh, he owns this and this, and he runs every inn or tavern, for miles around. If you can kind of give them that info, but not let them know where they sit in regard to their willingness to support your players, then you give them a lot of places or avenues to explore. Second, you want to let your players know, especially if this is a new arc or a new campaign where you're letting your players create completely new characters, you're going to want to let them know which kind of skills they could want, and maybe even have them kind of divvy up the jobs based on what would you need in politics, right? Not everyone is going to need to be a master of persuasion, frankly, and that would make for kind of a little bit of a lackluster party build or composition. Some people are going to be the bruisers who are protecting everyone. Some people are going to be the muscle that's going out and like causing chaos at the opponent's rally or at the opponent's factories or whatever, right? You're going to want to have a multifaceted view of this and be like, hey, you guys need to figure out what you want to do, but you don't all need to be the same. And finally, kind of going along with just keeping the players informed, I would really recommend having you shouldn't label the NPC this, or rather you don't need to, but have a campaign manager, quote unquote, who he's an NPC that knows a lot of stuff, that as the players bounce ideas off, it can essentially be your stand-in so it doesn't break immersion, right? And so that there's a source of knowledge that you can always turn to if the players just are missing a key piece of info that would help them get kind of on track. Now, in terms of once you've kind of set the expectations, found out what they hope for, what you're going to want to do is when you're creating the campaign itself, you want to kind of think in terms of call and response. Like you'll have that in certain, songs and stuff. Think about that in terms of player action. So the call would be like, hey, one party acts, and the response is how they respond to that. That's a lot of what politics is, right? It's one person having like a campaign slogan that the other person reacts to. Or one person's like, hey, I'm doing this charity thing, and everybody's into it. And then someone else either sabotages that, or they have their own charity thing that they try and be like, hey, look at that person caring about the homeless when they should be caring about, this other big deal, right? It's kind of like that call and response. And throughout that, try and create situations where the players the characters have to have public decorum, right? Where like if they're doing anything, they've got to do it on the sly so that no one knows that, there's actual like violence and illegality happening behind the scene. But you're going to want to make a lot of stages for this to happen publicly, right? And a classic one that I love is, the local ball, because I think that DMs have a hard time approaching this, specifically because NPCs are hard enough, right? When you're having to control, when you're having to voice two different NPCs and keep them straight within even just one session, sometimes you're like, oof, I was hoping that we didn't have too much talking going on. But a ball, that's like, oh my goodness. A ball or a banquet or kind of a fancier setting, that kind of stuff, it gets a lot. It becomes a lot for the DM to handle and to keep straight all of the different parties and players, right? Now you can, and I would argue that if you've done the session 0, you don't need to, come up with every single with a billion new NPCs or nobility for the players to talk with. Rather, you just need to make a space where everybody that was on that list of 6 nobles who are kind of neutral and you need to get to your side, or at least not, just PO them too much, right? Just have them all be in one place, be in that ball, and have it kind of be, and this is something that I would think would be very fun for you, is kind of treat persuasion as a track, right? Whether it's like, hey, you're helping out the nobility in different ways, right? You went and you helped muck out their stables, which, that's a skill check just to see how well you did that. And then, okay, their positivity went up one or down one. And also, like, if they're at the ball, they can kind of negotiate these different things that they need to do for the nobility. They can also have these conversations that themselves can move them up and down the track. Or if you have a shorter political campaign, then, it could be fun to also be like, hey, if you screwed up your relationship with Count Hegemon over there, then that's a burnt bridge, and that's fun in its own right? Because Count Hegemon, he goes over to the opponent, and suddenly later on, when you're trying to do a big endeavor, you're sneaking around trying to get something done, or you're trying to support a different noble, then suddenly that Count Hegemon's goons come out, and you're like, what the heck? What are they doing helping the bad guy? And that kind of becomes a fun thing. We've talked about embracing failure as something that makes the campaign more interesting versus just a straight up wall that your players can't cross. Think about political campaigns and influencing influential NPCs in a similar way, where, if something doesn't work out, have it become like kind of add a bit of a nasty flavor to the campaign, or a stumbling block that makes it more interesting, but still pushes the story forward. And finally, one thing that I think is very important is whenever you're doing any kind of D&D campaign, have you noticed how players can get off track very easily? They can see an NPC who, you just tried to add a little bit of flavor to and be like, oh, they're having a hard time. And suddenly you have to come up with a whole backstory and a whole, side quest about that NPC because one of your players was a little bit too much of a goody two shoes, right? It's same for this political campaign idea. If you're going to do it, have your players create concise goals and objectives. Be like, okay, what do you want to do? And what steps do you need to find out? And you can use that quote unquote campaign manager NPC to influence that and keep it within bounds, and also make it fun and unique kind of settings, right? You could be like, hey, what do you want to do? Oh, you want to protect the town who is currently overrun by a bunch of gangs who just have kind of taken over, or rather corrupted the officials, and the town's just in a bad way because the gangs have a lot of power. Okay, so what's your objective? To clean up the city, to remove the corruption. Okay, in order to do that, what do you need to do? First off, you need to get a new leader in place, and you wouldn't necessarily give all these suggestions, right? You try and get the players to come up with goals and objectives on their own, because that always is more motivating. But they could be like, oh, we want to get a different leader, which could be one of them. We want to take out the bosses of the major, 2 gangs, and we want to rally the people together or something, right? So long as they have those different, the main objective and then the sub objectives, then you're cooking with grease, right? Then you can get going with creating different sessions that will answer those different things, and then you can weave in different political trip ups or opportunities, such as persuasion checks, intimidation, them having to go support a local supporter who is having a hard time. Whatever it is, if they have a main objective, then you can get it done in a timely manner. It won't get too crazy, and the players can enjoy a really fun offshoot of a political campaign without it becoming just too long and drawn out, and no one likes that. So what I'd really recommend is kind of homework for you. If your players end up in a city sometime soon, just think about how you can go about making the role playing more than just simple role playing. Think about how to make it into an opportunity for a whole new avenue, right? It could be as a business owner, which I think will be a separate discussion, but if you're going to be on theme with this episode, try making a political campaign arc. I think that you and your players would have a lot of fun. Of course, talk with them, you bounce ideas off of each other to what would sound fun to them, and then create it. And I think it'd be really cool. And as a final tip here, make sure that even though, I'm talking a lot about a D&D campaign that's like political, and it's like, oh, you're trying to get a new leader or sway the vote or something. That's all super normal stuff that can be stressful. This is probably how I would put it. It's very stressful thinking about the normal world, and politics is not a simple subject nowadays. I think that's not a surprise. So throughout this, I would really recommend that you don't just make it a normal political situation. Add some fantasy to it, right? Remember that they're playing D&D for a reason. If it is a political campaign, don't just make it a gang, right? Make it a gang that has a magical spell that they're brewing that would enslave the town, right? Or make it a gang that, they go into somewhere and then they disappear as if they have some kind of magic, and your players go in and, the local people don't know magic, but you have a wizard or a druid or whatever. Just infuse magic into the situation, right? That way you can have so much going on, right? It could be, there's just so many opportunities to make a normal situation like a political campaign into something just magical and yet different from what they normally get during a D&D campaign. So go out, make the best of your campaign by adding some new political flavor to it. And until next time, let's roll initiative.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action.
You one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
Drama.
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
And Stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.